Hello, everyone. My name is Lacey Powers, and my talk is Debian tips and tricks. I work for a little company called Moonshadow Mobile in Eugene, Oregon. We do geospatial mapping of voters and transit agencies, trucks, things like that. And this talk is basically things that I've learned and that my developers have learned and found very useful to apply. So there's always this thing that people talk about called DevOps, where I'm operations staff. I've been a systems administrator for almost 2 decades. Sometimes I have to write code. Most of the time that's Perl because I can write it really quickly and it's good for all sorts of things. And then sometimes I'm overwhelmed and the developers try and do operations work. But the important thing is that we're all trying to accomplish something together. We're all working towards one goal, so sometimes it helps to teach each other, learn from each other, and basically enhance each other's knowledge. So, yes, as I had said before, each of these tips and tricks that I mentioned, I've actually put to use, and my developers have used as well, and found them really quite handy. So, the first thing is this little package called Debian Goodies, and I don't know a lot of people that have heard about it, but I found it to be really useful. It's got a whole bunch of different utilities, one where you can look at the man pages of a deb before you install it. You can do various greps and globs and everything, and some other apt searching. A lot of these tools are actually written in Perl. And they've been around since 2006, but not a lot of people have heard of them. There's two really important ones that I've found handy, and my developers have also found handy for dealing with services, and that is check restart and which package broke. So check restart basically tells you which services need restarting because of updates. When you apply like security updates and everything, library versions will change and they'll still be referencing a deleted library in memory as a part of being a running service. So this will tell you which ones are outdated. It does some interesting munging inside of sys and proc, and utilizes LSOF to see what's been deleted and what hasn't been. So a lot of the output will look like this, where I took this from my personal Debian server, which for focusing on other things means I haven't restarted a bunch of these services, but it will tell you the number of services that need to be restarted, what their PIDs are, and whether or not they have init scripts to restart. So clearly I need to restart my OpenSSH server, postfix, fail2ban, and NTP, and it tells you all the commands you need to do to restart. So yeah, luckily I don't have to do a full reboot because I haven't done like a kernel update or something. Or if you run check restart when you've updated libc, it's just hilariously long. So at that point, it's like you'll be better off just rebooting. So, and it will also tell you things like these processes don't have an associated init script with them, like ISC, DHCP client, and IRC. And well, I know that my IRC instance is running inside of a tmux session, and I don't quite feel like restarting that and having to go through changing windows and things like that. So not going to bother with that, but ISC DHCP client. I'm like, well, where's that associated with? So a lot of the times, if you look at the output of systemctl status, because on later Debians, there's old stable is still supported until April, or no, the end of May. End of May, that's the last Debian that does System 5 init by default. So I haven't talked about, I'm not going to talk about that sort of thing, mostly because on a new Debian install, you really need to be doing Jessie or Stretch. So you're going to have systemd. So yeah, I have the systemd commands here. So that's associated with, that's hanging off of ifup eth0 service. So I know that if I want to restart the DH client, basically I can do systemctl restart networking, and it'll hang for a second and then come back on my SSH session, and then that'll be patched. But if you don't know what processes don't have an init script associated with them, just running systemctl status will tell you everything that's running in a tree. And if you want to know about a very particular process, you can always do systemctl status and say something like ISC DHCP client or OpenSSH server, and you'll get logs and statuses and how long it's been running and a bunch of other useful things. But this is useful for seeing what's running and what you need to restart. So, okay. Now, which package broke? This is an interesting one because it shows a package and all of its dependencies, and they are sorted by the latest install is at the very bottom. So the output looks something like this, where I looked at Perl base and everything was on July 18th when I updated to Stretch. So all of this matches up, and then Perl base itself was updated on the 23rd of September. So you can use this to see, like, okay, what's gone on here? What was the last thing that changed that was associated with this package, so you can start to like troubleshoot and work from there to see what's gone on. Another thing that I've found invaluable also is the debsums utility, which is in a different package. This is another Perl script, and it gives you can configure this to automatically calculate the debsums and save them for everything that you've installed in there. When I do consulting work, I always like to grab this and run it because it tells me all sorts of things that have changed. And it's also good for the occasions where people have accidentally installed over system packages because, well, I've had developers who wanted to update Python, for example, and then did a configure prefix /user make install, and then completely messed up their system. So this told me everything that it touched, and then I was able to grab all of the Debian packages and reinstall them over and basically rescue their work system. So it gives you a lot of output without flags. It's got a bunch of other flags, but the critical ones are some's changed, which shows you what in the base package, excluding configuration files, has changed. So if you've modified something, or if something else has modified something in a base system package, like I picked a thing at random and I just added a space. So for an example here, But if someone's really got down into things and changed a bunch of stuff, or if they've, for some reason, done something like grabbed a package from testing and installed it, then this will tell you, well, provided it'll run. But the other really good thing about this is changed, and then you add the config flag, and this tells you all of the configuration files that have been modified from the base provided package. So on my personal server here, I've modified the Apache 2 configuration, I've modified the default configuration that come in, did some modifications to my SSH config, a bit of hardening and some other stuff. I like to run rootkit hunter, and I've changed a bunch of things there. And I run unattended upgrades on this server, which I will get to in a bit. But you can see exactly what's different, and if you want, you can go and look at what package it came from and see, like, okay, well, this changed with this, and why did they do this? So this gives you a starting point for, I've been given access to this server, I'm supposed to figure out what's wrong. Here's a starting point of things that have been modified. So you use the output of this to figure out, like, what package did this file come from? So you do the dpackage -s and point it at the full file path. And then after that, I tend to look at what are the non-obsolete packages on that system that don't come from a standard Debian repo. Because sometimes people will add in repos like, for instance, the Postgres repo, PGDG, or the Oracle MySQL repo, or the VirtualBox, or any number of other useful repositories. And there are a lot of them that are actually useful. So this little aptitude regex will tell you where these things came from. And then you can use this interesting apt cache Madison command, which gives you a machine parsable representation of where did this come from, what's its pinning priority, what's the repo it came from, that sort of thing. And it's called Madison because way back in the day, a lot of Debian tools were named after women like Brittany, and this one, Madison, where they've replaced all of these tools, but these are names of older tools, and honestly, the output is still really useful. But unattended upgrades, because I mentioned that before, and this can save you so much time and hassle, just so much. You install unattended upgrades, just do a dpackage reconfigure, because it doesn't come enabled by default, and the curses will tell you, like, okay, do you want to take updates from the stable repo? Okay, we'll do that. And you can modify it if you want, but by default, if you just hit enter repeatedly, it will only pull in security upgrades. And it will only be the ones that match the app default release. So like for stable now, that would be Stretch. For old stable, it would be Jesse. And for old stable, because of the Debian LTS project, that would be Wheezy. I've used Debian since 2000 when they added PowerPC support. And I've had 3 times in that entire time where a security update broke something. You can also set it up once you go in and modify the config to email you. You can have it email you what you did, or you can only email on failure. And just to keep up with security updates and everything, I suggest to every one of my devs on their workstations and their dev boxes and all of this stuff, just to make sure that they have the correct security updates. And then if they, for whatever reason, they don't want to reboot, just go and use check restart to see what services you need to restart after the security update. Okay, next. Okay, now we get to systemd, which is the default init system in Debian, Jessie, and Stretch, which are 8 and 9 respectively. Some people find it, controversial. Lots of people have very strong feelings about it. Despite that, it's got useful features. It really does. See some of the arguments, I can see some of the other arguments, but it's what we have to use, so we may as well embrace that. One of the coolest things about this is that it does process supervision, and it doesn't do it terribly badly. It uses these unit files, which are much easier to understand, especially for a developer. Like, I don't think developers know Bash or Bourne Shell nearly as well as like a systems administrator, because they look at it and they're horrified and like, what does this do? And why do you have to quote this? And I've found that showing them how to make a unit file, and then with a new service that they write, they hand me a unit file or something like that, to be very, very handy. Also, a lot of them I know who, have their own personal stuff, basically use this template that I went through, and this is the very basic template where you don't have to worry about, okay, here's what the service is. Like, this is a little web service mapper. It requires Nginx. It needs to start after Nginx, so it takes care of the boot order for you. It says, okay, what user does this run under? Because a lot of the time I see people running it just under root. And so I'm like, yeah, especially if it's like a network-facing service. And then you can just do an exec start and then a bash command. And, you can put this anywhere. You can change that bash command to whatever you need. And you can make sure to get your full text log. And the restart on failure is what you need to do the process supervision. So if it crashes, it'll restart. And by default, if it crashes like 5 times in like 30 seconds, it'll just stop and fail, but it'll keep trying that. And then on install, you can do the wanted by multi-user target, which says bring this up only in multi-user mode, rather than if you happen to be booting into single-user mode, don't bother starting this, because it's not going to work. But yeah, this means I don't have to think about what's all the configuration files and everything and where things go. And then you just put like the service file into either lib systemd system, if it's a system package, or etc systemd system. Just run systemctl daemon reload so it knows about what's in there. You can put stuff in your home directory too and start things that way, but that gets into some weirdnesses that I didn't think I had time to go into, especially since I have a minute left. Systemctl enable is key for it rebooting, coming up on reboot. So anyway, in closing, I hope that a few of these tips and tricks make your life easier using Debian. And yeah, are there any questions about anything? Yes?
The obvious one, how many of these translate well to Ubuntu?
Pretty much like 99% of them. So, yeah. Yes?
Not using systemd with things like Postgres.
Yeah.
Because we've got, we're just switching to systemd in our system now, and we've got a debate whether we can still use PG controls to turn stuff up and down. I mean, we can, but is there any conflict with systemd?
Only Yeah, it might get unhappy if you start it with PG control. Um, but if you disable that Postgres service, then you should be able to use PGCTL as you, however you want.
My concern is that we're just switching to it now, but on every other server we've got, going back to really, really old stuff, that, sort of 5, 6, 7, 8, years ago, we can use PG control and Apache CTL to start everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're switching to the old stuff, and we're going to have to change all our.
Yeah. Yeah, having used Postgres under systemd, it's not remarkably different. You do just need to, like, if you do like a restart or a start, you need to make sure to do a status Postgres after to see, because sometimes systemd will just silently fail unless you actually go check and ask what it does. It won't print anything to the screen. So that would be one of my pieces of advice, having run lots and lots of Postgres servers. So, okay. Thank you.
Okay.